Okay, well, thank you very much for asking us to this daunting task of starting to identify the impact of COVID on intelligent buildings. I'm not sure that we have completely understood, but the four folks on this screen have been kind of wrestling with this for the last couple of months, and we've been trying to figure what does it mean to our industry, and there's certainly a lot of impact for sure. We have had this Monday Alive thing going for about 3 weeks, I guess, where a group of us have just been chatting, pretty open format, talking about things. I've been, as always, writing articles, endless articles, but the twist I've taken on it is that it's going to require us to adaptation like we've never had to do before, because everything that was a constant is now turned into a variable, and we have this bigger problem that people are working remotely as we are today. Are the people going to come back to the buildings, and will the buildings actually be repurposed? Almost everything you touch is a variable, so that's an interesting thing. So what that means is a lot of adaptation is going to be necessarily by our industry. The next thing is I basically have twisted this towards like a global reboot. If you kind of imagine that we all are like a computer operating system, there was this virus came along, and basically to prevent us all from giving that virus to each other, we were all shut down, sent home, as it were. And now we're all kind of sitting in the wings and are thinking about how are we going to get back? How are we going to reboot? How are we going to get back into the buildings? How will the buildings be used? How will the buildings be viewed? How will people view the return? So we're starting to try and get our mind around that. Some of the big real estate firms have created some excellent resources. I've attempted to link as many of those as I can to our site and my LinkedIn shares. Also, Monday Alive has also started linking some of these resources, and each individual is starting to share particular articles that we think are significant. So I think that's an important piece, which leads us to the next piece, which is excuse me, which is the how are we going to recover? And I'm kind of spinning that in the fact that we all have to do research. We have to basically reinvent ourselves, and we have to recreate our business models, head out for a reboot. And if it doesn't work, we have to repeat the process. And so those are some of the big ideas at large. So I'm really pleased to have the panel, because the panel has good depth and good direction. I think we all kind of represent a piece of the industry. And I guess I just turn over the talking. I'm going to let each one of them introduce themselves. I guess I didn't introduce myself. I assume most folks know who I am, but maybe not. I'm the editor, owner, founder of AutomatedBuildings.com, which is an online magazine, which has been for 21 years. And I think I've actually been a member of CABA for probably that long as well. Although I keep busy enough that I have not been as active as I should, as Ron Zimmer reminds me. Anyway, Mark Petok, would you like to take over and give your points on this?
Sure, Ken, thanks very much. My name is Mark Petok. I'm the Chief Marketing and Communication Officer for LinkSpring. I'm also one of the board directors of Project Haystack, and also a contributing editor and cohort of General Sinclair, as I like to refer to him. But I'm going to start off and just make some statements and observations. And I'm hoping that, we'll hopefully have time to get into some of these and meld them with some of the other colleagues on this presentation with you. So first and foremost, I want to make this statement. As an industry, we have gone from fixing the plane while it flies to where the COVID-19 pandemic has caused us to rewrite the rules to where we are not fixing the plane in midair like we used to do. We are building it, and we're building it on the fly. So when I say that to the industry, I'm saying that to technology providers like myself, building owners, integrators, contractors. And I think that particular statement right there is applies to any of us in any shape or form that we're in this industry. And there's been a lot of discussion about the next thing with related to COVID-19. I say that we have the foundations and the technology and solutions today, that it just takes some additional thinking to be able to apply those to the challenges that we're now faced with because of COVID-19. The biggest fallout that as I see it from COVID-19 is the way that we manage and operate buildings has forced a very significant paradigm change. We're shifting from a place where we were driven in our buildings in and around performance, efficiency, energy, sustainability. Everybody on this call knows what I'm talking about. To ones now that we are not, we will be, but we are going to be driven by risk mitigation, safety, crisis avoidance, and the all-important word trust. Again, we have to build trust in our buildings all over again to ensure that employees, occupants, workers feel safe and confident to return to their former places of work. One thing that this virus and pandemic has demonstrated is truly the importance of smart building readiness. And I think if we ever needed something in our industry to push us continually forward with intelligent buildings and smart buildings, this has done that. And I want to kind of end with, to give you some thoughts about the types of conversations and implementations that I think people should be concerned with. I've divided them into two key areas. One is operational environmental implications, and the other is business. So some of the things that I would suggest to you that should be part of conversations are, what are the implications of restarting equipment and systems safely? What new costs are going to be anticipated now and required to follow up in this new reality world we're going to be living in? How does proactive and preventive maintenance look now? What will be the square footage and the amount of enclosed space required now per person? How will the open environment change? From a business perspective, what are the short-term and long-term implications? What new regulations, building codes, compliant regs that we're going to be required to follow? And if you don't think they're coming, they are debating this on the Hill right now. And yesterday there came out a saying about that before litigation can start, there's got to be some foundation in which people must adhere to help thwart the charge of litigations, which we all know are going to be part of this whole new environment now. A couple other things, and then I'll turn it back over to Ken, is what new privacy regulations are we within our industry, whether building owner, operator, technology provider, integrator contractor are we going to be forced to deal with? And then lastly, but obviously, the whole cybersecurity. We've been talking about the importance of cybersecurity in our space for the last 8 to 10 years. The whole paradigm now has changed as a result of this. So with that, those are some implications and conversation points I wanted to share with you. Ken, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. A really good point, and I like the way you've spun it in a positive thing. And I think out of all of this gloom and doom, there is a silver lining in all of this, that the buildings will become important places of healing, and health and welfare will be moved to the top of the class. Is Tom Surecliffe there? I hadn't seen him sign in. Tom, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Would you please introduce yourself and give us your take on this, please?
Sure. Thanks, Ken, and thanks, CABA, for having me today. I'm Tom Surecliffe, co-founder and principal of Intelligent Buildings, and we're a smart building management consulting and managed services company. And we have had a long focus on how building technology improves performance, but also manages risk. So we were sort of in this mode, thankfully, as this came along. And I echo that Mark said, and really maybe just the starting point is something that Mark alluded to, is that we believe that it's property managers, and maybe by extension the contractors, but starting with property managers, that have the burden to create confidence to return and thrive in buildings. Now, there's a lot of things that have to happen to make that occur. And I would also say that, there's estimates of 10% to 50% in terms of, what companies are going to use in terms of square footage. And, this is going to come out the wrong way, but we don't know and can't control that number. But what we as Intelligent Buildings and a lot of us on these calls can do is we can try to at least raise that floor, whatever it is. If it's only 50% coming back, we want to make 52% come back. If it's 70, we want to make 75. And so that there are a few risks that have occurred specifically to owners, managers, and as a part of this COVID-19. One is, and these are just kind of basic, but it is actually contractors just walking into buildings, servicing buildings that are in low occupancy mode, or even in the new normal. So it's the physical walking in, and if you have a large portfolio, are you screening those contractors, and really putting aside for a second the general public issues, which are really important. But we in this industry segment that we're all in, we got to deal with our contractor friends, and even if it's us. The second one is, if you, obviously we want to do as much remote maintenance and management as possible because of this, and notwithstanding some people have to come on site. And when we do that, we've now put increased stress on already poorly configured control systems and maybe bad remote access practices. So we've got to deal with that. It's an issue that was coming on in recent years. We've all been talking about it. But it's just gotten supersized because of the intensity, not to mention the hacking and phishing of buildings and contractors has gone up significantly. And we do a very large number of contractor phishing campaigns that are specifically related to our industry. And they are opening phishing emails at twice the rate of the general public. So those are a couple of things that were immediate, new, or intensified risks. And then the third thing, again, Mark touched on it, is that there's going to be and Ken did too, a series of new use cases we're going to have to employ in the building. And one of the challenges is, and the opportunities is, we've got a jumble of digital systems, sensors, connections, contractors, integration. There's kind of a jumble of those things in our building. I say a jumble because they've been set up for operational efficiency and energy efficiency and all these traditional things. And now what we need to do is look at that as clay for us for how can we maximize all those digital systems and sensors and contractors and connections for public health use cases, because revenues are down, rents are strained, the economy's challenged, but we've got, as Ken said, we've still got to do something in the building. So the first thing we want to do is leverage all that we have as best that we can. Putting all that together, again, Ken, to kind of finish on a positive note, we need to act. We meaning the owners, managers, and contractors. And there are ways to act relatively low or no cost and building up into more significant investments in the new normal.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was great. The other thing I wanted to point out is we have this opportunity in the fact that we were late to the virus, and we have folks other places in the world that are actually recovering now. And I think we can start watching closely how they're coming back and what's working and what isn't working. And I think we have to watch these use cases extremely close. And we need to be agile and be able to reconfigure ourselves and basically implement some of these concepts in our building and be prepared to collapse them if they have some unforeseen problems and stuff. So I think that's good. And I think that reads right into Ron's piece of this, is I think he's going to tell us exactly how this is starting to impact our whole use of being online and the whole communication side of it. Ron, can you speak to that?
Certainly can. Thank you for having me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ron Tullis. I'm the Technology and Application Manager for the Enterprise group at Belden. My background is mainly in transmission lines, waveguides to coax to twisted pair to fiber, and it's really all about the infrastructure. It's that layer zero. And I think that since we all experienced what happened, got telemedicine, all of our kids are online schooling, and we're all working from home. We're having this webinar, and everything's being done online. And the first thing that I looked at was, is there bottlenecks? What's causing these disruptions? Why is it clicking in and out? That type of thing. And really, what I've been looking into is that the bottlenecks are not caused by the speeds that we're using. I mean, this webinar is probably using a couple megabit stream for each of us, but it's the vast number of people that are on, and that's exposing some of the weaknesses in some of the infrastructure. So those that have been updating the VPNs, updating their infrastructure, making the backbone data rates high enough so that it can handle the big influx, those are the ones that are seeing success. So that's why we see varying different qualities of service from everybody, even here on this panel, from what we're hearing in voice, but even things that I've seen as people do things online. Some people are better than others, and that's not because of their lack of connection. It's due to the infrastructure that's getting them to the server and then back to the other users, and that's really the big thing that I'm seeing is what's going to be changing. Obviously, we were seeing an uptick in data rates that's been seen around the world. And during the COVID, it's been higher. The average peak rates has been higher, and it's predicted that since everybody has experienced this new way of doing things, that this new data rate use is going to stay higher. So how are we going to solve that? That's that's where we're kind of looking at things right now.
Great, Ron. That's super take. I know myself, I've been online in the last couple of months, probably more than I have the last 20 years. So and we've been online since 1999. So we have a bit of experience on that side of it, but the whole idea of using Zoom and every other Google Hangout and Microsoft's and all these various GoToMeetings and various platforms has become a way of life, and it's becoming obvious that that's going to be a radical change. If you're if you're not online, you're not going to be part of this next evolution. Greg, is there a way we can ask questions, or how do we do that in this format?
Yeah, if people want to ask questions, they can raise their hand and I can unmute them, and they can also type their questions in the chat box, or there's also a Q&A box as well.
Okay. Do you maybe want to administer that, and we'll just chat for a bit more, and if anybody has any burning questions, we'd be pleased to answer them. Is there anything you would like us to address, Greg?
No, I think we'll just leave it up to the questions from the audience. It'd probably be the best strategy.
And how are we doing time-wise? We're in that 30-40 minute range now.
Yeah, I think you have a good about 20 minutes left. I think.
Oh, super.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the best way is if you have a question, raise your hand and then I'll unmute you, and then you can speak your question just for the flow of things.
Okay.
Ken,
it's Ron Zimmer. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, good. I got to raise my hand. Anyway, you have some priorities here. Thank you so much. This is a fantastic panel. All great people, leaders in our industry. So delighted to have you share your thoughts and wisdom. The one point that I know it was touched on, but I think it's so relevant that the new normal is here to stay. It's not changing. It's I mean, it will change, but we're never going to go back to the way it was, and that's important to know. So for builders and developers and facility managers and even architects and engineers, it's been I'll say, with the exception of some real leaders in that sector, and there are many around the world, but the vast majority have been somewhat reluctant to embrace what we would call intelligent building technologies to help increase the value and efficiencies of the building and even look after the wellness of the employees. That is changed, and there's an opportunity here. So what would you say to all the speakers? How do we really impress upon that, as Mark said, we have so much technology today that can really help them in this current situation. But how do we get that messaging through to them to say, if you hadn't looked at it before, now is the time, to deal with how technology, whether it's data analytics, it's ultraviolet light to disinfect, rooms when no one's in there, to develop a roadmap that our companies can help develop in cooperation and collaboration. Tom, I mean, your group has done that forever and do a great job, but we need to reach more and more. So just curious, is there a better way? I mean, webinars are one way, but is there a way that we can reach that group and really send the message that we can really help?
Hey, Ron, it's Mark. I'll
take the first cut at that, and then I'll turn it over to each one of my panelists and let them respond to that. But I think it's all about communication, and we have available to us all of these communication mediums, which frankly we're all struggling with to try and learn how to use them effectively. And as it turns out, our kids and our grandkids know how to use this technology better than we do. The curse that they were always spending their time diddling around online now has become an actual bonus that we can actually ask them, how the heck do you do this stuff? And they teach us. So anyway, that's an interesting one, but that medium will be the change. And there's no doubt that the intelligent building has to grow to be the self-healing. Come into my building, my building is safe, and I will ensure that you are secure. And basically saying those words and putting that on a big screen in the lobby is part of that message. But what we have to do to make that happen, talking the talk will be easy. Actually, making it happen will be difficult. Maybe you could start, Mark, by responding to the question.
Sure. Good question, Ron. I think that all of a sudden that our industry, all of us on the phone, we now have new cheerleaders for ourselves that we did not have pre-COVID. The cheerleaders are, in North America, I'm sure in Canada and other global places, is the federal government to the point where, again, what I said earlier, there are going to be workplace standards and federal rules of engagement we are going to have to follow in our building. So that's cheerleader number one. Cheerleader number two is going to be people like Moody's. We all know Moody's, as an example, is a rating house primarily known for financial ratings. But as new things have developed over time, they have started rating buildings and operations for cybersecurity. And I see them going into, them or others in this world, going into assigning ratings to buildings on the health as it relates to viral pandemics, this, so forth and so on. And then third, I think the C-suite, and from the perspective of is that if they don't comply, if they don't start employing smart building technologies, that what is that going to do to the valuation of their building and their portfolio? I believe that their portfolio and their buildings will be higher valued if they have this technology and they are meeting this whole sense of trust versus if they don't. So that's my response to your question, Ron. Good question, by the way.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, that's good. Very good. Is the change is going to happen. Tom, can you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I think I'm going to indict all my panelists here in the statement, and as well as myself, is that sometimes we're guilty of saying, hey, it's time for smart buildings. You need smart buildings, whether it's sustainability, then cybersecurity, and now public health. And nobody even really knows what that means or what to do about that. And so one of the things that I alluded to it in my opening statement is that, systems have been digital since the 80s. So if I go into a big building right now and look around, there's probably a lot of things in there I can use for public health. There's sensors, there's systems, there's analytics, there's access control. So one of the things maybe to lower the difficulty here a little bit is say, let's look at your existing digital systems and think, rather than, again, back to what Mark said in the beginning, rather than having all of them pointed at operational efficiency, what if we pointed some of those things and sequenced some of those things towards these public health? So that's one thing that would lower the temperature a little bit. And then the other thing I would add is that allowing building owners and managers who are not as technical as all of us on this call to think about it in terms of use cases. Like, what do I want to happen? Not do I need an access control and an elevator and all these kind of things. What do I want to happen? And then all the people that are associated with CABA and in this industry can surely make it happen. Just allow them to think about in public health use cases rather than point solutions.
Great, Tom. Ron, I'd like you to speak to the fact that all of a sudden communications as a utility has become huge in these buildings. And my perception is from what we've seen at the last bunch of realcoms is that the idea of the building owner taking back some of the responsibility of the in-building communication, both fiber and wireless. Could you maybe just speak a little bit to that, how that might play into this fray?
So for the in-building communication, definitely we're going to need more throughput for the entire building, and that's going to lead us towards higher data rates that are traditionally been handled with copper may turn to fiber. But before everybody just switches over to fiber, we got to remember how are we going to deliver power, because we're becoming very reliant on delivering power with these with our copper cables as well. In-building sensors are another thing that that's part of the communication click, and this is going to come onto the data center of the building. Is all the information from the sensors as well. There's going to be more sensors. So, if you look at, in order to make a building safe, what are we going to have to do? Maybe it's a facial recognition, maybe it's a temperature scan. We don't know yet. Those things are unfolding, and I think someone said that, you know, let's see what's happening since we're a little late to this virus, what other people are doing, what we're doing to have success. From that, that's going to determine how we're going to make the building safe, and that's going to tie into the communications structure of the building itself.
Yeah, and we have some questions coming in from the chat box here.
Okay.
And this goes into there's quite a few questions here. I'll just go over a few of them. But so when Mark, you mentioned that about safety and employees and trust that employees must trust that their workplace is safe. And how do you leverage in smart buildings in this to create a safe environment, or in terms of protocols, best practices, or are there protocols and best practices to follow?
Yes, there are. I think those, just like this whole thing, there's lots of questions and we're still trying to figure out answers, but yes. So for example, one of the things that I believe is going to be key to this is data. We've all talked about data for a long time and its importance and its relativity, but it has a whole new meaning and a whole new responsibility now. And so data from our typical systems, the environmental systems, which we've been doing for a while, but now new filters, UV lighting, as Ken mentioned, or whatever, again, the whatever, all of that is going to be available. And I think if I was a building owner and operator, I would use that information to then communicate that to the occupants and to employees to say, hey, we are, you know, our particle transmission is 0.00001, no need to worry about it, through some kind of dashboard and or kiosk in the facility. And then the other is that I think that people, it's wide open. And I think over time, we'll see some best practices come out as a result of this, to that point.
I think that's what we have to do, is we have to watch the use cases and try and document them. And I think we need to share the success stories. And I think even more so, we have to share the failures. And I think it's definitely, more and more every day, we have to think more like software people. So we have to, you know, fail early and then fix our mistakes. And in this thing, I think it's going to be exactly that. We have the advantage of watching others trying to recover. And the other one that's going to be different and quite a shift from before is where we were able to kind of come up with solutions that would span North America. I think it's becoming that there's going to be different solutions for different portions, because it's become like a state issue in the United States, and it's become a provincial issue in Canada. So we basically have these local and even a lot of city input as well. So we now actually have in one building, we're going to have to completely come up with a different strategy. So that means we have to be flexible, easy to agile, just be able to quickly change our systems. Again, this probably means employing a lot of new young people who only know how to work online. There's another comment that I made at Monday Live that actually got misquoted in the AI thing of it. I was basically saying that this is an incredible invitation to zillennials with a Z, that all of these folks are online and they understand this technology and they understand what's going on. They're sitting there, they don't have jobs, they're not sure where their future is, but they have a large knowledge of how online relationships work. And so they are of value, and you're starting to see them blended in, and you're starting to see programs from the large software companies that are starting to bring them in as well. So I think there's going to be a big turnover of us old guys here. They're finally going to get us, and there will be a shift towards younger, and I'm not talking millennial, I'm talking zillennial.
Hi, this is Journey Williams with CABA. What I've heard a lot of ideas, and I think a lot of the last question addressed it, of building owners going out and just kind of randomly choosing technologies and implementing on a whim now just to kind of get people back in the building. And I think something that's very important for this panel and others is to help lead and create the user stories so that there's a assurance and a path to protection for this, to say, here's the key features that you need to do, and here's the best order to do them in if you can, to kind of help the shock that will come as people implement technologies and then realize, oh wait, that's not what we needed and we have to turn it off. And I think some of the main thing is to get out to the system integrators and the end users a really good roadmap as early as possible with the pros and cons of each system. And I know I've been looking to a lot of these panels for help and as to how do you rate one technology over another with reference to the panel, to the pandemic and the rest of the system.
I think speak to that first. In this article that I shared with some of the folks here, it's actually coming online tomorrow with Connected Contractor. There is some good links to some of the work that JLL has done, CBRE, and Cushman Wakefield, is that it? And all of them have put out documents, basically how the buildings will open. There's also been another interesting twist that has come out of that, is we have an underlying problem in the fact that some of these buildings have been mothballed for 2 and 3 months, and we actually have the potential of having our old friend, the Legionnaire disease, starting to reappear into some of these buildings, and we have to assure and clean systems before they're started back up again. So that's interesting, an interesting side of it as well. Coming up with procedures is difficult, I think, because again of the areas, the fact that every area has different code and different requirements.
Ken,
go ahead.
Tom, and this will lead into you, by the way, probably. So good question, by the way, and 2 things. So one, to me, it all starts with a strategy, and you got to determine that strategy first, and then start to investigate how and what types of technology is going to help you accomplish that strategy, which obviously strategy includes objectives. The other thing is that one of my fears of this whole thing is that as the world of IoT became normal speak in our industry, we heard and still hear a lot of hip and hype on technologies, this, that, and the other, versus real and relevant. And I think the cornerstone of anything that anybody uses needs to be the real and relevant part of this, not the hip and hype.
Yeah, Mark, I think it's a good point, and strategy, and also to add the word methodology. A little methodology can go a long way right now, because as we've already heard, and we see it every day, people are scrambling and looking at technology point solutions from dusk till dawn. And if you're looking at technology point solutions alone, you're never going to get there. If you, and the other thing that the question asked very rightly is, what is the order and priority? So if you just take a step back, look at the areas you're trying to address. It isn't just social distancing. What, as Ken said, what does that have to do with Legionella? Nothing. So we've got to look at the categories of use cases, and then we got to prioritize how we can take some steps immediately, and then how that evolves. So it is hard to resist just running around and grabbing things and putting them in, but the categories and the prioritization and the steps will get you going the fastest. And Ken mentioned the property management firms and the consulting firms, big ones, putting out all these really cool looking and useful things, but they almost all lack, what do I do next week? And that's, you've got to get to there as quickly as you can.
And we have a question from Konkana as well.
Yes, hi. Great discussion, by the way, very engaging. My question is very simple. We, generally as an industry, we have struggled with financing, project financing, and which is probably going to be all the more critical for building owners, technology vendors to battle with every time they propose a new strategy, which is definitely perhaps the working solution, but there would be added struggle as far as going through this new scenario of how we are going to secure funding to enact some of these projects. So what are your views? What do you see as perhaps some changes to the way we've been doing things, business model changes that you probably foresee as going to resonate more in the new scenario?
I was hoping somebody else would jump in on that one. Sounds a bit difficult, but it's the big problem, I think, is going to be for them to redefine their financial model. Is this building now viable, or are we going to lose so many tenants that it was simply going to walk away from it or repurpose it? That's going to be a bigger problem from a financing point of view, from my point of view. Therese brought up an interesting point in our Monday Live. She pointed out that most of the software people, the Googles and Amazons, are going back slowly, very slowly, to populate their buildings. Although if you look at the big picture, that is very much to their advantage, because the longer we're in this mode, the longer we're dependent on their services. Actually, this has been, for some people, it has been sort of a positive business shift, greatly increasing their incomes. And for others, it has been a disaster and will be challenging. Can anybody else help me out?
Yeah, can I would just say that there is there's still an asset value equation here. So as we said earlier, whether it's 10% or 20% or 50% fewer people, the banks and the asset owners and asset managers, they're not going to go to zero with it. So there is this paradox where I've got less income, lower rent rates, worse economy, but the equation is not zero. So there is going to have to be an accommodation for the paradox to make buildings inhabitable, and at least create that confidence and trust, as Mark said. So I think this is we said at the top, we've got to be aware here. It's going to be very difficult, maybe even devastating in a lot of ways, but buildings are not going away and they're not going to zero. So we all in this community have got to just try to raise that floor.
Yeah, and I would add on the financial side, will there be a point where there are financial incentives for building and owners and operators to proceed with implementing and deploying this technology because they are getting additional financial incentives from government or whatever? And I think as part of this whole stimulus thing, that is being discussed, and because I think certain people are realizing that. So, I wouldn't surprise me if we see something like that in the near future.
Yeah, and just for the sake of time, I think we're just about rounding at the end of this the time for this panel. But there'd be one final question we could go with, and then final comments. So this is coming from the panelists, who do you think the leaders in the rating agencies are? And are there any leading ones providing guidelines for COVID-19?
I would think obviously ASHRAE is the lead one, and anything WHO provides is useful information that we need to all heed. Any of the other panelists, would you jump in?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a number of them, but I would say that we've seen discussions about intelligent buildings, rating scales, and these kind of things. I would, if I were an owner or manager, I would advocate to them, don't wait on that. Developing a policy and an approach as quickly as possible is going to be more about confidence and trust than it is a score.
I would add that I think ASHRAE absolutely, again, that's on the operational side, but also you need to look at from the business side, and that is insurance, rating organizations like Moody's, as I mentioned earlier, and others, as well as legal, because whether we like it or not, there is legal there are legal issues that are going to be part of this, whether it's people suing a building owner because I got COVID and you didn't keep your building clean and safe like you said you were, or that type of thing. So make sure you look at that side of the house too.
Yeah, Mark, and sorry, just 20 seconds on that. They unfortunately, we are entering the litigation phase, and that's why I mentioned earlier that we're focusing on contractor health risk screens. You got a big portfolio, you got hundreds of contractors. You're going to have to document you even asked some questions before people came in the building.
Greg, do you want us to wrap
Well,
up?
I think, yeah, I'd just like to thank all the panelists for their time. And just a reminder, we are recording this webinar and sharing it out on the IBC webpage. We'll be sending out an email to all those that registered. And we'll try to get all these questions. There's a lot of questions that came up in the chat box and the Q&A box. So we'll try to get those answered by the panelists and send them out and try to get everyone proper answers.